Hello, everybody. This is Brian Ankney with Auto Success Magazine. I'd like to welcome you to this Auto Success webinar today. My guest today is Chase Abbott from VinSolutions, and we're going to talk about, we're going to stop the revolving door and foster employee success with CRM and technology training. Now, before we get started, a couple of things I'd like to share with you. For those of you who aren't aware, Auto Success, we were acquired April 1st by Babcock's Media, and if you haven't been to our site lately, go check it out. June 1st, we launched a new website. Got a lot of really cool new content on there, a place for you to find all the webinars, find past webinars, find podcasts, find blogs, find all of the magazines. We also have a new newsletter, and starting in August, our new publication, Dealer Service, will go out polybagged with Auto Success, so keep an eye out for that. Before we get started, I would like to kind of go over the process for asking questions. We do invite you to ask questions, ask all the questions you have. We want to make sure we get all your questions answered. Now, depending on the device that you're using, the functionality can be a little different. If you're on a laptop, a tablet, a desktop, it's very simple. That pane that goes down the right side of your screen that says Go to Webinar. Near the bottom, it says Questions. There's a little triangle there. Click it. It will expand, and you can type in a question. Hit Enter, and your question has been asked. Now, if you are on a mobile device, it's a little bit more tricky. There's different manufacturers, different operating systems. Some of them work a little differently. You're either going to have a header, a footer, or a picture frame that goes around your screen. Somewhere on there, there will be a question mark. Touch the question mark. It'll open up the thing for you to type in a question. And then once you've asked a question, it works a little bit differently device to device. Most of them you can just swipe. It'll go away, and it'll take you back to the webinar. Now, if that doesn't work for you, somewhere in that header, footer, picture frame, there will be an icon that looks like a desktop flat screen monitor. And you'll touch that, it'll bring you back to the webinar. Now, just in case, for whatever reason, on any type of device, you get kicked out of the webinar, or you need to go and you come back and you want to rejoin us, the link that you used to join us today will bring you right back. And if you dialed in on a telephone line, the telephone number and the code that you used, they will work again. So just dial back in the way you did this time, and you'll be right back on the call. Now, one more thing. If you have not joined Auto Success webinars yet on Facebook, please do. This group has a couple of purposes. One, it gives you an opportunity to interact with the speakers and the Auto Success staff. You can suggest topics. You can ask questions. You can suggest future guests. But the most important feature and functionality of Auto Success webinars is the ability to interact with other like-minded dealership people just like yourself that are trying to achieve the same goals that you are. On all these webinars, there's not some magic switch that we're going to identify that you can flip and all of a sudden things are better. I wish there was, but there's not. So, most of these things, it's going to require weeks, sometimes months, maybe some of these topics even longer to achieve, and to implement these changes into your store. So I invite you to share with each other your successes and failures as you go. Maybe somebody else's success can help you get there quicker. Maybe a failure that you have experienced might help somebody else to avoid that. So please go to Facebook and join the group Auto Success Webinars. And with that being said, I would like to welcome Chase. Chase, my friend, please take us away.
Brian, thank you very much. Hello, Automotive. Thank you for spending your afternoon with me today. You've made a great decision, I'd like to think, because we're going to talk about some things that are really important in our industry and some things that I think our industry sometimes just turns a blind eye to, and that is the revolving door that is synonymous with automotive. Having ran a Ford store for 6 years and then being on the vendor side the last 10 has really given me a great insight into this from both sides of the fence. So I want to give some information to you, and I really want you to leave this webinar with some takeaways and some action plans that you can really go implement into your store to take your dealership to the next level. So with that, I want to get rolling. The first question I want to ask you, and the first question you need to ask yourself, is do you really want to make a change? Is your dealership in a place where it can go and harbor new technology? Is there a problem with the management staff? Is there a problem with the salespeople? There may not be the next horizon, if you will, to go in and really get serious about utilization of technology and CRM if there's some real roadblocks already in your store. So ask yourself, do you have the players in the game to go win the game? And succeed in this topic, and one that is very crucial to making culture work at a dealership. If you're constantly changing the players, you're going to have a real hard time providing a great customer experience, which, as we all know, flows into a ton of other things like dealer cash and CSI and allocation and all of those things. So ask yourself that question. If you can answer it yes, I think that this webinar is going to give you some real tips in order to make this work and how to stop the revolving door from keeping on spinning. So the average company with fewer than 100 employees, so most dealerships, spend 10 to 15 grand on hiring an employee. They spend $2,000 to train the new employee, and then this is kind of comical. They get 12 minutes of training every 6 to 12 months, which is absolutely crazy to me. So we're all about front-loading the training, but no sustainability, no maintenance, which presents a real problem. Your CRM training, technology training in general is your responsibility. I mean, the reason we use it is to make our lives easier. And some people have a real hard time coming to terms with that, especially some of the older generations that didn't come up with technology in their face every day. You can see at the bottom there, it's just like oil changes. If you don't change the oil on your car, the engine will explode. If you don't train on your technology, on your CRM, your dealership will explode. I guarantee it. We're just going through the motions. We've got to take that by the horns and really put in a process to make sure that we're getting our due for what we're spending with whatever vendor you might have installed or whatever vendor you may be talking about. It's too crucial not to pass up. You have to have a process for maintenance to make sure that you go the distance and there's ultimate sustainability in your dealership going forward. Adapting to today's millennial and Gen Z workforce, look around your dealership. I'm guessing you see a lot of younger folks in there today. Millennials represent such a huge part of the workforce. As you can see today, more than 1 in 3 workers in the U.S. are millennials. And me being a millennial myself, I can really speak to this topic and really focus on the fact that you need to have processes and tools in your dealership that reside on the cutting edge because nobody's playing Nintendo anymore, right? There's PlayStation 4s available. So we have to evolve and we have to take that same logic and implement that into our stores. If we're using tools that have dust on them because they're so antiquated, they're not going to get used. And you're just kidding yourself, or you're just wanting to be reassured that you put a check in the CRM box or the market pricing box, or yeah, I've got a website. It's not a great one, but I got one because my 20 group said I probably should, right? So we have to get deeper than that, especially with millennials, or they'll check out and the revolving door will keep on spinning. By 2025, millennials will comprise 75% of the workforce. So with every new initiative, there's going to be some early adopters and there's going to be some late adopters. And when 2025 rolls around and you look out in your showroom and you've got 75% are millennials, hopefully you put a process in place to make 2025 a successful year. I fear that that's not happening. And this webinar is somewhat of a remedy to that to get you ready for what's coming down the pike. It's not the same old deal where there's a used car price sheet and nobody gets to see it, and you know, we call everything a sled. That's just not the case anymore. The internet has changed automotive drastically, and the millennials are the earliest adopters of all that technology, so they need to go hand in hand when it comes to your dealership. Going a step further than that, 84.7 million by 2020, Generation Z, right? The generation after millennials will make up 25% of the population. And these are like millennials on steroids. So the first few years, right, some of the millennials may not have had all that tech in their face like Gen Z will. My daughter, who's 5 years old, can run an iPad better than my mom, who's 60. So it's a very big difference today in the early adoption of technology, and your store better be in line for that or you're going to have some real problems. Check your tech, right? 63% of managers said that the pace of technological change and their workplace is too slow, meaning they feel, more than half feel, like the tools that they are on aren't up to par, and in order to get it changed, the process is just too slow. Kind of goes hand in hand with the number one gripe most of the time about the car business, and it takes too long to do a deal. And if we're going to look high and low under every nook and cranny to how to try to improve our sales process to make the time to buy a car shorter, then why on earth would we not do that with our sales folks and with our employees to make their life easier? Because it's all playing in the same game. So you can see there's definitely a need for this, and what the solution or the remedy for that is every 6 to 12 months, you really need to sit down and review the products that are out there. As we all know, technology changes all the time. So it's really important that your tools reside on the cutting edge, but in order for that to happen, you really have to have a process to make sure that you're there. And that's something that's never going to stop, and it needs to be recultivated. And I think about every 6 months. Some dealerships do it once a year, maybe go to NADA, look at the new stuff. And that's great. You should keep doing that. And the folks that aren't, you really got to roll out a process for this. To every 6 months, you sit down and you look and see what's available to you, because your competitor down the street that you're constantly going against may be on that new cutting edge solution, giving them a leg up with the customer base in terms of relevant offers or speed and follow up, and you're really missing the boat and you don't even know it. So every once in a while, you got to go out and do a little bit of reconnaissance and see what's available to you in the market. So what do millennials really want in a workplace, right? This is very important stuff. They want the latest and greatest tech that allows them to do their job. And what I mean by that is everybody can have a CRM, and that's great. But to log a customer, does it take me 8 clicks to do it? And that's what I'm talking about, the granular level past just we've got a decent CRM, we've got a decent website, it's working, it's doing okay, I don't want to change it. I hear that a lot. Right, but is it taking 8 clicks when it should have took 2 or 1, for example? A millennial will know that. A millennial came up on technology. They will know that the process is too long. So you need to make sure that you get the cutting edge tools in there so that they don't leave and check out. And you have really great talent walk out the door because they're playing on old operating systems. They need learning and development opportunities. This is crucial. They need to feel like they have a career path. They need to understand that, that we understand that they're highly educated. Over 65% of millennials have a college degree. So we have to, they're used to going to a classroom. They're used to learning. So we need to make sure that we have those kind of opportunities for them in the dealership, and not just at onboarding when you hire them. The maintenance, the sustainability, that we're doing that every single month. We're giving them opportunities, and we're sitting down with them, and we're figuring out what their goals and what their career path looks like in their mind. The other thing, flexible working hours. When I worked at my dealership, we opened the store at 8 in the morning, and I left usually around 10 or 11 at night. And that was not helping our culture. I had an owner that did not want to change it no matter what, but I firmly believe that you should shift your employees. You're not going to build a great culture, to me, when they're there 12 or 13 hours a day. There's still a lot of dealerships doing the bell-to-bell schedule, and I think you really need to go, put on some Michael Jackson, some Man in the Mirror, and do a little self-reflection, because that's not helping you. That's not helping your bottom line. If you've got people that are working 13-hour days and 80-hour weeks, you're just going to run them into the ground. You can't run a horse that fast for that long. You can't do it with a salesperson either. And then they need an outlet to express their thoughts and concerns. So a real lack I see in dealerships today is I don't see very many one-on-ones. I see the big sales management meeting in the morning, and that's great. You should do the rah-rah. But at the same time, I'm not seeing the one-on-ones, and probably because it's uncomfortable for some people, and they really get into more emotional stuff than sometimes the desk manager wants to hear. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen. You've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable to really break through some of these barriers that we've been dealing with for decades in automotive, right? So have one-on-ones with your employees. Put those on a schedule that will really help you understand what kind of culture you have and then where you need to go from there. 77% of millennials said they would be willing to take a salary cut in exchange for long-term security that is a good fit. That tells you how important it is to make sure that the environment and the feelings they have about that job are in line with what it needs to be. It's not so much like it used to be when I came up in the car business with a bunch of mercenaries that didn't want to do anything that didn't result in some commission for them, which I understand that too, right? So it's just a shift in the way people think from generation to generation. But what we have to do is accept that that's the way it is and put a process in place to get the return on it like we need. 87% of millennials say that professional development and growth opportunities are very important. So speaking to that again, making sure that you're talking about those things. If you don't ever talk about career path, they're not going to think there is one. So you have to get ahead of it. You have to put that in front of them more often than not to really make sure that you have the ability to retain your top talent and you can move out the underperformers. That's great. But they would still want to stay, and that's what you want to get to, is a culture that is self-correcting. What's the bottom line for your dealership? Every time a business replaces a salaried employee, it amounts to 6 to 9 months of salary on average when you add up all the costs. The cost of losing an employee in the first year could be 3 times the person's salary. So what this says to me is we can't afford a revolving door. It's just impossible, and it makes it terrible on your managers to have to be retraining people all the time. You've got green peas out there not knowing what they're doing. I don't care if they came from a sales training class or whatever. They're still green, and it's going to take them a while to get to a point to where they're really providing a good customer experience. So the goal here is to stop that door from spinning and to get long-tenured folks that really understand your dealership, your process, and the kind of experience we want to give to the customer. So we have to do some things to get ahead of that so that the bottom line has the potential to grow like a general manager or a dealer principal wants it to. One of my favorite graphics, right? I stole this off the internet, so it's probably copyright infringement, I'm sure. But I love this because it's so true. And I remember my days in the dealership. You know, what if we train them and they leave? I've been asked that very same question before at the Ford store. And, you know, I love the response. What if we don't and they stay? So you've got to make sure that you're doing the right things because the process is going to dictate that the system is going to produce and create great salespeople. And if you can do that, that's the real kicker because the players come and go, but it's the system that really sustains you as a dealership long-term as a profitable store that has a great customer experience. So keep that in mind. A nice little graphic. If you forget, you can always go back and reference it. So some key takeaways from this section. Make room for millennials and Gen Z. They are coming. It's imminent. They are upon us. So we need to make sure that we have a process for that and check your tech. Make sure you're on the cutting edge tools or have a process to get you there if you're not right now. 13-hour workdays are not helping your cause, I promise you. The reason we hire pretty much ex-retail here at my office at VinSolutions is because they hate the amount of hours. So when we bring them into the corporate environment, they absolutely love it. We have culture here. We have training. We have many ways to reward great growth or great job well done, you know. So it's something that they're not used to, and they really take it on. And we have an extremely high retention rate here because they were kind of abused, if you will, right? Like a little abused puppy coming out of automotive because they worked 80 hours a week. And that sucks because automotive is a beautiful business. I love it. I miss it to this day, busy Saturdays. But at the same time, I don't miss 13-hour workdays. I don't think anybody does. So training builds retention. Retention builds culture. You're never going to have a culture that's to write home about unless you have the same players building it all the time. If you're constantly shuffling out, then you're just never going to get there. It's going to be extremely difficult when you've got new players in there every few months. And then, you know, ask yourself, am I really doing one-on-ones, you know, with my staff for feedback and personal development? Am I really finding out what the problems are in the store? Because you can ask those questions in a management meeting on Saturday or a Save a Deal meeting, whatever. You're not going to get the same kind of response you get if you pull that person in on a one-on-one and sit down with them in person. You're going to get a much different response, a much more clearer picture about really what's going on with that employee. And they can also tip you off to some amazing things that you may not be aware of that are going on in your own store once they really get into your confidence. The other thing about one-on-ones to make sure that you do is make sure you put them on a recurring schedule. Don't do them 1 month and schedule them without scheduling the month after. I see that a lot. So we'll put them on, and then we'll do them, and then, oh, I didn't put it on your calendar, oh, I forgot, and then it's 3 months later, and the employee's going, where's my one-on-one, right? I really enjoyed that. I really felt like I had a sounding board to really tell you what was going down. So make sure you put those on recurring. I do mine the 3rd week of every month, so I'm not doing it the last week of the month, as I'm sure you guys are busy too. So they know that now, and they expect that. So it's a really big deal for us to make sure that we stay in line with really what we need to do, because the greatest source of info is your own team members. So training, and the keys to success on this, because all of you guys have installed software in your stores, I'm sure. Some of it better than others, but you need to train on all of it, because it's worthless if nobody knows how to use it, right? So here are a couple keys that you can take away to make sure that the training you do in your store turns out to be a success. I think you really have to start by understanding where you're at right now. I mean, you cannot measure anything unless you set a baseline, right? So you have to make sure that you set a baseline to know what nirvana looks like down the road, and what's the state of the union, if you will, and where we're at right now with this technology. So make sure you understand that, because you can't measure anything unless you know where ground zero is. Effective training has to be owned by all players, right? This is crucial, because if you have a manager on your staff that is anti-training, that is fostering the non-training belief, that says you need to be on point out there waiting for ups or on the phone, you don't need to be up there in the classroom. I've had tons of managers like that. And you may need to look at that hard and see if that's the right person for your store. I mean, is that where you want to drive your culture? There may be long-tenured folks, but if they're fostering bad behavior and fostering the non-usage of these tools, they are doing way more harm to you than the 30 years is giving you as a positive that they've been in your store. Trust me. So sometimes you got to clean house a little bit to make shifts of this size. But if you don't make shifts of this size and you're just trying to keep the doors open and not worrying about opening more doors, then you're just going to be on a plateau for quite some time, I think. So make sure it's owned by everybody. Have them sign off on it. Have it be a part of the curriculum. Have them own some of it, because if they don't, they always have the escape route to say, well, I wasn't even involved in that. I don't believe in it. You cannot give them that ammunition. You have to take it away before you get into the process. So bring them into the process, make them part of the process, and make them own it. 74% of leading companies say coaching is the most important frontline role sales managers play. 100% believe in that. Coaching one-to-one, day-to-day, super, super important. And the other thing I'll say is do it from a positive point of view. I've had quite a few tyrants and brow readers in my day in the car business, and they didn't do much for me to motivate me other than to prove them wrong, maybe. But that's only got so much legs on it, you know, it's only got so much runway. So you've got to make sure that you're doing that from a point of being positive, and then you get negative if you need to when you move them out. But you're positive up to that point, right? 60% of salespeople are more likely to leave their job if their manager is a poor coach. What that speaks to me is you got to have top-down buy-in from this, because if nobody's watching the watchers, if your GM's not engaged, if you're dealer principal and you're not engaged, then how would you know that the manager is a poor coach? Unless it's so bad or blatant that the salesperson actually comes to you about it. So you have to inspect what you expect there to make sure that the store has the right type of manager that's going to breed that culture you're trying to drive to. Training never stops. Train or die. If we do not evolve, we will perish. I guarantee it. So you have to make sure that you not only keep your tools on the cutting edge, but then your staff right behind that is on the cutting edge as far as utilization goes to really get what you need out of the tool. So employees who are engaged and thriving, 59% less likely to look for a job. So what's that say to you? You better make sure they're engaged. You better make sure they're making money and that they're thriving, because if you don't, you're like, just give me another one in here. You're only making it harder on yourself. I never understood that. So try to retain your top talent, manage up or manage out your low performers, but try to get that culture and that tenure, because what will happen when you do that is those seasoned salespeople, those seasoned service writers, those seasoned, whatever it is, are going to self-correct when another salesperson may try to go rogue or go off the reservation. So they'll self-correct that for you, which means one less thing for you to do as a manager. And that's just getting ahead of this and really anticipating it. So make sure you remember that stat. Over half or less are likely to look for a job if the manager is a poor coach. So full engagement or bust, train or die, no half measure. You're either in or out on this. So you need to get everyone's buy-in on here and be intentional when you train on what you want to do. Be very engaging. And the third one, they're very important. Be an authority. Don't get up there and train on something if you don't fully understand it yourself, because if that happens, the whole training carousel is tough to keep moving, because they now question your authority and what you say up there while you're training. So make sure that you're very calculated on your curriculum on what you want to say and how it needs to be said. And then another thing, don't overcomplicate it. Don't do 3-hour sessions. When I was running my store, we did every day, Monday through Friday, we did 30-minute training blitzes, because after about 31 minutes, I would lose every single salesperson, and they would start looking out the windows at squirrels or thinking about lunch or if they're going to beat their draw this month. So don't go longer than 30 minutes, in my opinion. If you think you can hold them longer than that, more power to you. But for 6 years we did this, and 30 minutes was really the tipping point when I lost them. So do that, but be consistent. Do it every day. Know that they expect it. And then also, as you evolve in it, you can ask them what kind of curriculum they need help on, right? Because we need to ask them, where are some holes that you feel like we have now in the utilization of whatever tool it is, and develop curriculum behind the need, not just what you think they need to learn, right? So great way to bring them in and help build culture, because then it makes the salesperson part of it. It makes them part of what they're going to learn on. Therefore, they'll own a little bit more of it, and you'll get a little bit more traction out of that move. Everyone's accountable, even your vendors, okay? So I say that because if you have vendors installed now, are they really doing what they need to do to evolve your business and put you on the cutting edge with the tool that you already have in place? So you need to be holding the salespeople, the managers, the general managers accountable, but you also need to hold your vendors accountable. I mean, you pay them every month. So if there's a feature that you're not getting, make sure they know about it. Make sure that we can get a plan for what the timeline looks like on that. Or ultimately, you may need to switch your vendor. But make sure that you have a partner rather than a vendor. That's why I always say, look for a partner first, somebody that's going to be there with you to help grow your business, and not just a software company that's going to give you a login to a tool. Not all of those software companies understand automotive as well as others. So keep that in mind, because everyone has to be accountable. So key players in the training process, and who you want to pull in, who you want to make part of this to make sure that, again, the usage is what it needs to be. Some software companies are really progressive, and they do performance management. And what that is somebody tied to your account that is there for you, that their success is completely dependent upon your success as a dealership. Because being in software for the last decade, one of the biggest complaints out of any software tool ever purchased is, well, they trained me the first time and then I never heard from them again. And now we don't know how to use the tool, so we're just going to cancel it. And that's terrible. So make sure you look for progressive companies that have something similar to our performance management model, that you're going to have somebody there with you in the trenches, in the dirt, down there digging through lead source reporting and making sure that we understand what needs to be the next step in whatever process we're talking about. Also, too, performance managers are really great sources of knowledge, because in most companies that have this, they'll have 50 to 80 dealerships that they work with day in and day out, and they're really a great place to go for best practices, because they see so many different ways to do it with the amount of stores that they're managing. So very important to look for those kinds of things. And that really speaks to what I said before about finding a partner rather than just a software company that has a login for me that's somewhat automotive based. So the other thing is a CRM champion. I'm a big believer in designating champions for the technological, advances in your dealership. And that usually is maybe an internet manager, internet director, somebody that really understands the tools the best, to be the champion to make sure that the training goes round and round and it keeps on happening, because it's so important for that not to fall off. And if it's nobody's responsibility directly, it's not going to happen. So make sure you take somebody from your staff, and this is another great place to build culture and build that career path, and let them know, hey, we want you to be our CRM champion, and really make sure that the utilization is what it needs to be, or the website champion, or whatever the tool may be. So make sure you have somebody designated for that. And then also too, we also had a lieutenant, basically in my store as well. So if that person was off that day or on vacation, does that mean our culture stops and our training stops? Absolutely not. So it allowed me to put another layer in there, another spot for career path, and would be the next person in line should that person leave or get fired or whatever happens. So that way we can create not only the primary but also the backup to really ensure that it never stops. Because if it does, so do the ROI potential, the bottom line, the profits that go along with it. They also take a hit too if that stuff stops. So we can't allow that. Key players, vendors, managers, salespeople, and most importantly, ownership. I deal with some really progressive owners. I deal with some non-progressive owners, and the difference is night and day on how their stores run. So you have to inspect what you expect. If you're high up on the pedestal in a GM or high up on the org chart, dealer principal, whatever, and you're running a store, you have some real responsibility from the top down to make sure your managers are managing the way they need to be to ensure that everyone's job is easier and the culture gets better and we have fun, we sell cars, we hit our number, nobody wants to quit, everybody made money, and everything is great and moving on down the line. And that's when more doors start opening for most dealerships, is when they get to that point in the game or in the process. Some key takeaways from this section. Make sure you set a baseline, understand where you're at today so that you can measure it. Everyone has to commit. If you're not getting buy-in from someone, go to the owner, go to the general manager, and make sure that we get that corrected before we go down this path of technology utilization and making sure our training regimen is what it needs to be. Training never stops, but it has to evolve. You can't get up there and like, okay, it's February, we're going to train about, the OEM safety ratings, right? Or we're going to train about, CRM logging a customer. You've got to evolve that training. It needs to be fresh and new, and it needs to be based off the needs of the dealership. So make sure you have somebody, that CRM champion, that's going to go take this by the horns and make sure that it works. Find a partner first, a vendor second. Find somebody that's going to change the software to accommodate your process, not changing your process to accommodate the software. We don't know how to sell cars in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The dealership does. So you really have to make sure that the software that you're using allows you to be you in, your market, because that's what got you to this point. And you know what works up there or down there, depending on where you're at in the U.S. So find a partner first that's going to be there with you, and a vendor second. Keep it short, keep it simple. Do not drone on. Do not do 3-hour sessions. In my opinion, 30 minutes max. But blitz on it. Do it more often, shorter increments, and I guarantee you'll start seeing increases in closing ratio. You'll start seeing the real biggest thing you'll see if you start a dedicated training curriculum. It's just the confidence you hear in the people's voices that went through the training. If you're confident about what you're saying, it's a completely different delivery. If you're not confident, it's night and day. So make sure that we've done the things to prepare for that conversation, for every conversation that goes down in the dealership. So some critical factors to consider, and I'm going to give you some bullet points here at the end. I work in bullets a lot. Please feel free. Write down anything you think is relevant to you and how you can make your store better. But this will just give you some quick hits and a little bit of the process on how to roll this out to make sure your tech utilization and the culture that you're trying to build isn't just completely corrupted by a few different things. So you got to have buy-in from the top down. You got to have owner and GM commitment on this. And it's so important because that's who the managers report to. And if they don't feel accountable themselves, you're not going to grow at all. Manager adoption and enforcement. Make sure your frontline managers are using these tools and enforcing the usage of these tools. They should be, in a way, the champions, right? But they've got a lot on their plate. But they should right there echoing every single thing that the champion says that you designate. You can see the third bullet. Make sure that you take somebody that's tech savvy, that understands these tools, maybe a millennial, I don't know, as you do the math, and designate a champion there so that we can get the most out of the monthly bill we send to the vendor every month. I mean, what are we paying for, right? So make sure you're getting your due out of that. Demonstrate consistency. Make sure that you do your one-on-ones every month. Make sure that you do your trainings as scheduled. And make sure that it happens. And make sure that your folks know it's going to happen. It's inevitable. So make sure that there's a process for that. And then reward participation. We use a company internally here called Spark, which is pretty cool. It allows you to get in there and recognize somebody for doing a fine job on something at any time. And you can use the points to buy things online or get gift cards. And that's extravagant, right? So maybe that's the last stop on the automotive road here. But make sure you're sending out emails. Make sure you're bringing it up in the trainings that you're doing on Saturday mornings or the Save a Deal meeting. Make sure you're notifying that the people that are really doing a great job, not only with units out the door or per copy in F&I, but who's doing a great job with the training? Who got certified faster than anyone else? Who's really picked it up? And if we don't put those people in lights, it feels second fiddle, and it won't get the due that it needs. So make sure you reward that kind of participation on the training, on the building the culture, the CRM usage, the website usage, the inventory module usage, whatever it is. Make sure that you've got some kind of reward built in there to keep those fires burning. You want to identify your threats, right? You're constantly facing some competitor, I'm sure. So watch them. How are they training? How are they doing it? What kind of utilization do they have? Are they on cutting edge tools, right? Because when it comes down to A or B on which dealer they're going to go to, who may have the most relevant offer in their inbox or the best advertising display or BDP on their website may be the one that gets it. So you constantly not only have to measure where you're at versus the vendor space or the market space there, but also where the competitor is almost as important, just because that's who you're going up against every day, whether you see them or not. That's who the customer's looking at, right? Prepare for holdouts. You're going to have some. There's going to be some naysayers on this training stuff. That's what got us to the culture we're in right now with most of automotive, where it's just not happening. So prepare for the holdouts. Have a system in place for when somebody is being a naysayer, and make sure that the GM or the owner is behind that and that they will help enforce it. Evolve your content, curriculum. Make sure you're staying on the cutting edge as far as what you're talking about. And make sure you evolve and don't train on the same single thing all the time. If you drone on about the same old stuff, you're going to lose them. Training's tough, especially for salespeople. So you really have to evolve your content to keep it entertaining, to keep it fresh, so that they actually kind of want to go. They feel like they leave and they got a little better, and that's exactly what you're looking for. And then designate lieutenants. Just because the CRM champion is off on vacation, that does not mean the culture stops, right? Like I talked about earlier. So make sure you have a lieutenant there. You can call them whatever you want, second in command, whatever, to make sure that there's somebody that's back if that person's sick, if that person is on PTO or paid time off, that they come back and nothing has been missed and the training kept on going. And like I said, it also allows you for some career pathing there as well. And then also, management reporting, right? So we enter all this stuff into these tools to make sure that what? So that we can just enter it and be compliant? No, we do it so that we can pull reports back out of it so we can look at trends in the data, so then we can make corrections to our go-to-market strategy or see the trends between go-to-market and how long it takes to turn our used car inventory. And things like that. I mean, that's why we put all this stuff in here. We put it all in there so in 3 months when the customer calls you back and says, hey, I'm interested in that Toyota, that you're not digging through your desk drawer looking for 3x5 index cards, right? This is why we use these tools. Once the salespeople, once the personnel understand that it's completely there to help them and make their job easier, I think it's a real turning point on this utilization of technology and that culture-based environment like we have with dealerships. That's really the turning point, when they get it, when it really helps them. Like, I don't have any idea. But if, let me go log in. Oh, yeah, here, I got everything right here in front of me. I didn't miss a beat. We're right where we left off. Pull that up from my phone. I can pull that up from my laptop or my iPad, whatever. And that's what we want. We want to make it easy for you to sell cars. We want to spend more of your time selling cars and prospecting and less time clicking a mouse. That's very, very important. But you want to set the expectations and define the goals around that. You're expected to use these tools. You're expected to train on these tools, and you're expected to evolve and get better with them. And then what's the goal look like? Yeah, I'm expected, but what's that for me? Well, when we get here, I want to try to get your closing ratio up another 5% by logging all of your activity. We can really get granular and make sure we're providing a relevant offer back to the customer because I have all the data in front of me. So check your progress often. Let them know you're doing it via coaching. You can go in there and look at how many calls they're making, right, or how many emails they've sent today. That's great. But you have to go in there with a positive attitude and then coach that person to get them up to the next level. Super important. And what happens there is they know you're looking. They know you're in there looking at the data. You're watching what they're doing, which keeps them honest and makes them want to use it more and more and more. Have a process to evolve your process. Big believer in this, right? So everybody has a process, but nobody reinvents the process. The process is the process, and it gets old and stale. So have a process that every once in a while, just like you go check your technology every 6 to 12 months, have that same thing for the processes in which you're following up with customers, the processes in which how you're handling your team members, the process for how you're building your culture. Are you doing some team building stuff after hours? Are you doing the Susan G. Coleman walk, whatever it is, right? Have a process to keep evolving that process, to keep these folks engaged, to keep that dealership, the nucleus of that dealership that makes the day go round there and happy. And then hold team members accountable. If somebody's not doing it, logging their activity, if somebody's not, doing the updates they need to be doing, if they're not putting in their calls or their emails, whatever the process or whatever the problem is, you've got to hold them accountable. And that doesn't mean take them in an office and rip them a new one. That means take them in there and manage them up and get them to use the tool and set clear expectations around it, or manage them out and let the other sales folks know, the other team members, the other managers, whoever it is, know that they have to go do this or this is going to be the end result. So to recap, the action plan, 10,000-foot view here, stay on the cutting edge. You have a process to keep you there. It's very important. And when you're dealing in a competitive landscape like you all are in every single day, somebody's going to have a leg up. And how well do you anticipate that is the key for how successful you'll be. Train to retain. Make sure that you have a system in place to retain your folks. And you're going to need to do that with training and so they understand not only the process for how to use these tools, but also that there's a culture here. And they also need to know that you're actively building a culture and you're actively asking them for feedback on it and really make them part of the process. And I'm telling you, the results are glorious over time. If you can keep that and sustain that, you can really see some great things. You have to inspect what you expect. You cannot set guidelines or rules and then not follow up on them. You have to go in there and dig and look. So if you're not doing that today, if you're just sitting around waiting for the next up or the next lead, that's not going to work. It's not going to work long term. I guarantee you, you have to go in and disrupt sometimes and inspect what you expect so that you understand exactly what needs to happen on the next move. And then make everyone accountable. If they're not and they're not playing by the rules, everyone else, if there's a double standard, then cut the fat out. I'm telling you, it will cause you much more problems. If you're clear that this is your initiative and that's what you want to do, then cut the fat out and make everyone accountable so that there's not big rocks in the road as we're all trying to march down it, okay? So I know we had some good stuff there, and there was a lot of information. And I know the next question you're asking yourself is, are you ready to get started? I'm sure you are. And with that, I want to pass it back over to Brian. I think we probably have some questions, and I'd love to answer them, so I'll kick it back over to you.
Great. Hey, Chase, that was a great presentation. Hey, everybody, we do have some questions already typed in. For those of you that have questions that haven't typed them in, please do so now. We've got a lot of questions already in, but please give us some more. Chase, our first question is, you mentioned checking your tech every 6 months. How deep of a dive should we do? What are the things we should consider?
Okay, so what I would do on that is do a T-chart. Most people know how to do a T-chart. I do this all the time, based off a certain tool that you're using, and go through the pros and the cons, and survey your staff on what they love and what they hate about the current setup. That way, what are we doing? We're setting a baseline, right? And we're seeing where the holes are in our current offering. And then when you go review the tools out there, you want to use that T-chart. You want to check off all the boxes that you love and make sure that you still love them with the new solution. And at the same time, see if they can remedy any other cons for you. But again, unless you know where you're at, it's hard to see what needs to happen next unless you set that baseline. So make a T-chart, pros and cons, and then see, what vendors can check the most boxes off for you. And then the other part of it is, I hear this a lot. Dealers will ask, when we do presentations or what have you, product demos, well, does it do that? And we'll say yes, because it does. But you have to make sure that it's not 7 clicks to do it. How many, let me see how you do that. So as a bit of advice in the dealership world, make sure you're asking, how many clicks it takes to complete that task. Because sometimes when they go live on the system, 6 months down the line or 2 months down the line, they uncover things that weren't vetted completely in the demonstration because we didn't ask, deep enough questions. So both good points to take away. The T-chart and ask really granular, specific questions. If it's a pain point for you now, make sure you can completely solve that problem.
All right. How can we show career development path, or how can we show a career development path to a salesperson? What is the timeline?
For that one, the timeline is up in the air, right? I mean, the most important thing I could tell you about what to build that career path is you got to start talking about it. It was non-existent in my dealership until I got to the top, right, when we changed some things. But most of the time, if you just talk to these folks, if you ask them what they want to do, and in these one-on-ones, you'll uncover so many things you didn't know. And you have those, and you can really build a case for what that person wants to do. And once you understand that with your staff and you have some really good data, you can start to set expectations or what the next logical move is and what that person will have to do to get there. I mean, there's nothing in stone because, we're in sales. Let's not kid each other. Most of it's based off performance, right? But at the same time, you're going to designate high performers and low performers, and you better make sure you know what the high performers want to do next, or the high performers will hit the revolving door and leave your dealership. So start with one-on-ones to understand what they want, and then spend more time talking about, the next step in the process. Or if you're part of an automotive group, maybe, go into another store and running internet over there or finance over there or whatever. Everyone's different, but make sure you're talking about it. That's the biggest thing that I just don't see. It's just kind of not there.
All right. Our next question is, do you recommend sales teams that work together to make millennials more comfortable and reduce the number of hours they have to work?
Yeah, so I've seen some dealerships do it in teams where they'll have like a morning person and an evening person, and they're kind of on the same team. I see some dealerships that would absolutely hate that. It just depends on which one works for you. But the great part about that is when you take a millennial, maybe with a baby boomer, and you put them on the same team, they're going to work it out, right? Most of the time, but without management getting involved. And I think you really start to earn respect when you start to know the person better, because when that happens, you start leaving the stereotypes behind. That they have participation medals for everything. I hear all this stuff about millennials all the time, that we get a sucker or a ribbon for everything we do, and that's just not the case. But at the same time, you need to have that one-to-one connection. So if you are selling in teams, I think it's a great idea to put maybe an older and younger generation together, because somewhere in the middle is probably the best, and they'll both learn from one another day in and day out. And I think if you can get to that point where that respect is there, then you'll have that self-correcting, the old car dog says, oh, the new green pea doesn't know what he's doing. He's like, actually, he's on my team. I work with him all the time. That dude's really sharp. I think he's going to do some really big things here. And that stops that person from saying that the rest of the day. So it's self-correcting. And that's a beautiful thing if you can get to that point. But that's what we all need to try to drive to, whether you're selling in singles or teams.
All right. Other than sales and software training, should we provide other growth training? What types?
Yeah, so, sales, software training, great, right? But we really, like I spoke on just a second ago, training for the next step in the personal development, right? That goes beyond just how we want to sell cars or how to use this particular software piece. Is the team member or the employee really interested in self-development from a much broader scope than the periscope of automotive or selling cars at your dealership? So we love to talk about things, about where they want to go, what they want to do, and evolve them not only as salespeople, but as just people in general. Because if you can drive those same values down into your organization and hire really genuine good people, then they're going to be loyal to you more than likely if you do the things necessary to keep them there. I'll give you an example. We just actually started it just a few weeks ago here at our office, but we brought in we have a bookcase outside, and we're putting self development books up there from a ton of the different sales leaders that aren't necessarily automotive specific, but it's for folks that want to develop themselves and go to the next level. And what we want to do as managers is enable that. So we're putting those. We're all bringing in every book we've ever read and putting it there so that they can just grab one day and pick one up and start reading it and really start to self-develop themselves and have the respect for themselves to want to be better every day. As I always say, you're getting better, you're getting worse. Nobody stays the same. You have the choice on which one you want to do. So that's a good tip if you're looking for one. Bring in some of the books, some of the sales leaders around the nation, automotive, wherever, and put them at their fingertips and let them start reading them. Make it very easy for them to want to self-develop.
All right, Chase. See, what if our vendors don't offer any type of performance management?
Well, if that's the case, then do they offer any other solution to, make sure that to keep the fires burning with whatever tool it is? If not, if it's not virtual training, some people will do virtual training where you can log on and do a webinar with a live person, which is great. But they're not in it with you. You call back in, you get somebody else. So I think you lose some ground there. Some people have e-learning libraries, which are, great too. But it's not the same as having somebody in the fight with you. So I guess my answer is if that management model sounds appealing to you, as it would me, then maybe it's time to review your vendors again. And I would put, on the con side of the T-chart that, that the lack of a partnership is the first one to check off as I go look at new vendors.
Okay. Actually, and you kind of touched on this one a little bit. Should we have a champion for each individual technology partner or just have a single person for them all?
I'm an advocate for a single person. Now, you could go, every tool's got its own little wheelhouse, right? But I'm an advocate for a single person for the connectivity and the usage to make sure that it happens for the dealership. If you put 5 people in charge of 5 tools, there's a 5-time greater probability that somebody's going to drop the ball. So I'm a believer in putting in one person with maybe a couple lieutenants, like I mentioned, as backup or carries, handles the overflow to make sure that they own that, and that's what their job is. Some of my most progressive dealer groups are in this same exact model, and they flourish with it because somebody owns it at either every store. I have a couple groups that have, 20, 30 rooftop groups that have one at every store, and then another CRM champion that sets over the top of that. So that's worked very, very well for them. But there's a couple of different ways to do it, but those are a couple of ways you could look at that.
All right. Well, it looks like that's our last question for today. Chase, as always, wonderful presentation. Everybody, this is Brian with Auto Success. I'd like to thank you all for coming today. Chase, is there anything that you would like to share with our audience before we let them go?
No, I just want to say thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. I know you guys are busy. We're right in the middle of the busy season for selling cars, and the fact that you joined this webinar to make yourself a little bit better today is a testament to what you can do in the future. So thank you for your time. I truly, truly appreciate it.
Chase, thank you for your time. I hope to have you back again soon. Everybody, have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.